Hello and welcome back to the Man in the Middle channel. I'm Pedro Alberto and this is part 3 of our Shadow Work 101 series. Now in our first video, we talked about the shadow and the locked rooms inside of us. And then in our last video, we learned how to find the keys to those rooms using the triggers and projections as guides. So if you haven't seen those videos, make sure that you watch them first. Today, we're going to talk about the final, most important and lifelong step in this journey. We're going to talk about what Jung called integration. So stay with me. So what does integration actually mean? Because it's a big word, but the idea is actually really simple. Integration is the process of bringing the shadow out of the darkness and into the light of your conscious life. So it's about unlocking all of those rooms, not to get rid of what's inside, but to allow them to be part of your whole home again. And the reason you want to take this step is because, as we have talked in the past, these shadows, whether we like it or not, will show up in our lives one way or another. I always like to use this analogy. Think of your repressed shadow like a beach ball at a pool that you're trying to keep underwater. Can you do it? Yes. Will it be difficult to hold for a long time? Yes. And the further you push it down, the more it will likely pop up in an explosion. The point is to release the pressure and let that beach ball float to the surface. That's what integration is like. But also, let me talk about what integration is not. Because it's not about becoming a perfect person. It's not about killing your ego or getting rid of your anger or sadness forever. The goal of this work is not to get rid of parts of yourself, but to have more of yourself available to you. Integration is about wholeness, not perfection. So, how do we do it? The first step is what we have been doing, using the keys, having the dialogue, and getting to know these hidden parts of ourselves. But the second part, the step is a conscious choice. It's the choice to find a new, healthier job for that energy that has been trapped in that locked room. It's not to ignore the shadow. It's to make the shadow work for you instead of against you. Let me give you an example from my own life. For years, I found myself drawn to partners who felt like projects. I had this deep, compulsive need to fix them. And through my own shadow work, I'm realizing this wasn't just me being a good guy. It was a shadow pattern born from a deep childhood fear of being disposable. And I was desperately trying to make myself so necessary that no one would ever leave me. Now, integrating that shadow doesn't mean I stopped wanting to help people, but instead of using it to control my intimate relationships, I have a new job for it. I pour that energy into my community work, where my ability to manage projects truly makes a difference. And I'm pouring it into this channel. And so that way, in my marriage, I'm learning to just be a partner and not a project manager. So the energy is the same, but the job is different. Here's another example from a friend of mine. So for a long time, he carried this deep-seating anger inside of him. And he could blow up at any minute, and people never quite knew what had set him off, and it was really bad. And through doing this shadow work, he had a dialogue with that anger. And he learned that it wasn't a monster. It was a voice of a very young part of him. A little boy who, during a time of intense family crisis, had made his own pain invisible as a way to spare his family's feelings. That pain eventually morphed into anger and the inability to ever feel like anybody truly knew him. He didn't feel seen, and that prevented his ability to feel loved, to feel secure, to feel safe. So that anger was a desperate, lifelong scream to be seen. It doesn't mean he doesn't get angry anymore, but now, when he feels that old, hot rage rising, he can recognize it as a trigger and as a signal of a core wound. And instead of lashing out at the person in front of him, he can pause and give a voice to that younger part. He's learned to say, I'm not angry at this person. I'm just really feeling unseen right now. And then work from that. That one small shift from acting out the anger to being curious about its real origin has changed everything for him. So that is what integration looks like. It's about building a relationship with those parts of yourself that have been hidden for so long. You become the wise, loving parent to your own inner child that you needed. And so now it's your turn. I want to give you an exercise, a way for you to start this practice today in a small, manageable way. I call it the 100% honesty challenge. And the goal isn't to have a huge, dramatic, life-altering confession. The goal is to find one small, low-stakes opportunity to choose your authentic self over your performance. A way for you to give a voice to that shadow part of yourself. What you're going to do is find one small instance where you can be 100% honest. Maybe it's telling a friend that you'd rather not join them for an event because you don't want to go, instead of making up an elaborate excuse. Or maybe it's saying at work that you don't like an idea that otherwise you would have pretended. You want to be your authentic self. Let me give you an example from my own life. One of the first times I ever did this challenge, I had to tell my spouse about some changes to our schedule for the day. And I was really nervous about it because it was an oversight on my part. And rather than mentioning it, I kept putting it off because it was my mistake. And the pang of anxiety came with the negative story of, shit, Pedro, this is why people can't trust you. So in that situation, normally, my old pattern, my performer, would have shown up. I would have made up some excuse or plans changing that were outside of my control and managed the situation to make sure that my spouse wasn't flustered or would think anything negative of me. Because remember, my shadow is afraid of being abandoned. And so even small mistakes I make are amplified in my mind. So that's a performance designed to avoid any potential conflict by having a mistake. But this time, I took a different path. I walked into the room and just told a simple, vulnerable truth. I said, hey, I have to tell you about a couple of things that I didn't tell you about earlier, and I feel really nervous about telling you because I feel like I screwed up. And I kept putting it off because in my head, it's a big mistake, but I'm hoping it won't be a big deal. And doing that didn't feel good in that old way that I somehow won because I was able to avoid conflict. Because although I would have avoided conflict, in my mind, I still knew I screwed up. And the anxiety would not have gone away. And I wouldn't have given my spouse the opportunity to show me that it was no big deal. But by presenting my whole authentic self, giving voice to the shadow that feels that if I make a mistake, I am going to be abandoned, I felt peaceful. Although it was just a simple moment, it was the feeling of putting down like a heavy backpack that I didn't even know I was carrying. And that is the feeling of integration. In that small, tiny action, I showed myself that being honest, speaking to my vulnerability, and allowing the shadow to come out could also be safe. So that's your challenge. In the next week, or even today, I want you to look for one small moment where you would normally perform. And in that moment, I want you to try choosing the simple, vulnerable truth instead. It's a small act, but it is the beginning of teaching yourself that it is safe to be you. Let me know in the comments if you tried it. And so the result of all of this is this quiet but profound shift. You stop being at war with yourself. You have more energy, more creativity, because you're no longer spending all your time holding that beach ball under the water. You feel a sense of peace, not because your life is perfect, but because you have accepted all the imperfect, beautiful, and messy parts of who you are. It's about being able to stand in your own house with all the doors unlocked and finally, truly feeling at home. Thank you so much for joining me today. As I always say, this work of turning your face towards your shadow with curiosity, it changes you. You're no longer the person who was unconsciously living out old stories, and you're not yet the fully integrated person. You're like me, a man in the middle. And this is where the real journey begins. And this is just the first part of the map. In our future videos, we'll use these same tools to explore even deeper territory. We'll talk about how the shadow shows up in our careers, in our offices. We'll ask the difficult questions like, is it love or is it a trauma bond? And we'll go right to the heart of the pain that so many people feel to understand that the obsession you have with your ex is actually a core emotional wound. So I hope you'll be here for the next chapter. And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button. I keep saying that I'm a new YouTuber, so I need all the help that I can get. Thank you.